nation. And so the struggle for responsible government is not an easy process. The federal government in Ottawa, they like power too. They like wielding control over the North, so they weren't willing to give up those powers. So you have to fight tooth and nail, bang your fist on the table in a real way, get mad at them, swear at them, kick them, do whatever is necessary to wrench the power. It's the same thing with CBC. I remember CBC was in the North. They never had one word of Aboriginal languages on the radio. And I don't know how many times I met with them, almost had a fist fight with the CBC guy from Ottawa. Finally, in their, they're being really kind to us. They let us have half an hour, But it was a real fight to get, which are very commonsensical and good. It seems like to get anything out of the federal government, you have to fight real hard. But that's what it took. You have to be really kind of mean and determined and get into a fist fight, a wrestling match with them
That sounds like Northern New Brunswick. In politics, there's a lot of acting going on, and I'm surprised to learn that you were managed with all of this. That you were an actor. That you actually acted. This is in the book. How would you rate yourself as an actor?
Yeah, I should say that I just remembered one thing talking about taking critical measures to win over. In the assembly, I have to tell you a little bit. A politician. That at one point in the assembly, I threw a cup at my colleague, who was a chairperson, wasn't very nice to me. So I threw a cup at him. Fortunately, I didn't hit him. And then at another point, my colleague, Tagat Curley, a good friend of mine, we were generally on the same side, but he was egging me. And I went over and hit him. On the side of the neck. But that's just the way politics played, and you can bet you get their attention. You get their attention in these little steps. Okay, after I finished politics, and I had to go away from the North for 2 years because I was really burnt out. And by this time, North of 60 television program was being started, and it was out by Calgary at Bragg Creek. And so the people that were involved in it asked me whether I'd be a consultant. And so I agreed. And so I would go out there every other day to provide advice to them. And also I was their slavey Dene coach, because the actors had to use the odd Dene word. And I was there helping them out. And I was also in 2 little episodes. And so every other year now, I get a check for about $4, or 1 year it was $6, and that was my reward, I guess, or what do they call them? Residuals, yeah.
What do you do with the money?
I kept the check. I messed up their bookkeeping system, I'm sure. I kept the check as a souvenir. But I feel fortunate to have been. And I used to tell them, there was a lot of kissing and stuff like that on the movie set. And I said, I don't think people do that much of that, in the North. Because often between the nurse and the RCMP that were Michelle, and so they told me, Nick, he says, this is not an anthropological document. This is showbiz, and so. But I did advise them that, we did do those things, but we did it under the blanket. And,
I'm not going to go there. I have a few more questions for you, Senator, and we'll just get this one out of the way, because it's too self-serving, but it's about the Senate. You've been in the Senate. It is... I found when I sat on the Aboriginal committee with you, it's like Landon Pearson, you learn so much from your peers, and you understand so much about what is going on, and there's some really policy issues taking place. I was joking a moment ago about you needling Senator Patterson, but I get a kick out of that, watching the way he, as the chair of Aboriginal, sometimes begins to squirm in his seat as you really get down to the crux of an issue, because you really care about the North, you really care about your family, and you really care about the Aboriginal situation. We have seen the Truth and Reconciliation report. Your book is timely. I think that your work in the Senate goes unnoticed, because you're still there. You're not the premier. How do you grade the Senate these days?
Well,
in the work that
I'll tell you, having been in real government, having been in a real assembly, in comparison, Senate is like play. Like it's like play. It's not real. You go through the motions, question period, and so forth, but it's not real. It's not like the House of Commons for sure, and it's not like a legislature where issues are dealt with in a very real way. Ministers are questioned, and they can rise or fall depending on what your answer is. So I did notice that. The other thing I have to say is that
in the book,
not in the book, but in real life, I could not understand the partisanship between parties, liberals, conservative, NDP. People, different parties don't like each other. And I couldn't understand that because I'm not from that culture. I'm not from that system of government in the North where everybody gets along and you deal with issues on their merit and in the end try to reach consensus. So that was a new experience to me. So I've written in the book, I think the Senate is a great place. It's a good institution. It's a sober second thought. And the Senate committees is where most of the action is anyway. Senate committees review legislation, bills that come through the Senate, and we as a Senate committee do it very thoroughly. I think better than the House of Commons because we're older, wiser, and we're not as partisan. And so 25% of the bills that went through the Senate are amended by the Senate. It used to be a few years ago. It's changed in the last couple of years. But I have a lot of respect for the Senate because it does good work and it's a check on government, and that's my general view towards it. But I do feel in some respects, having been in real government, that the daily process that we have in the Senate where there's question period and so forth, it's not really, it's not real, it's not critical, you know, because you can ask questions of the leader of the government in the Senate, but sometimes he's not even in cabinet, and how can you know the answers, you know? So you're just going through a motion. It's for show a little bit, you know, on the record that shows you asked the question. And also, as usual, if you think answers are not given in the House of Commons, they are not given, further less so in the Senate. So that aspect of it, I felt